and I was in theater school.
Well, you made it all the way through theater school and didn't bang anybody?
Yeah.
How's that even possible?
Well, I mean, I made out like PG makeouts around the face. I made out with like pretty much every man in my circle and a few girls.
Heather, thank you so much for being a part of Growing Up Fundie, this new podcast venture that I'm on. I really, really appreciate having you as a guest. You're my first one. I'm so excited. So just to kind of introduce anybody who's listening to this, Growing Up Fundie is a podcast where we talk to people who grew up in conservative religious backgrounds of some sort. It doesn't necessarily have to be Christian, even though I know the word Fundie technically or typically describes Christian faith, sometimes even Baptist specifically. But the idea behind this podcast is to just get the true story of your true experiences, whether positive, negative, humorous, serious, whatever tone you choose to tell your story in, you are welcome to tell it in. And just kind of the goal here is to just kind of learn from each person. The reason I started this podcast is because my boyfriend grew up not religious at all. He had no religious influence whatsoever. And so I started telling him about things like Awanas. I don't know if you guys had that. It was,
yes.
Yeah. So you're one of the few people who know what I'm talking about when I say that. And I started telling him certain Bible verses and certain hymn lyrics, and he didn't believe me. He literally didn't believe me, especially when I got to Revelations. I was telling him about the rapture. He did not believe that that was real or that people lived in fear of something like the rapture in real life. And so then I started to wonder, what are the details from other people's religions that I don't know, that I would be shocked to find out? And so that's kind of what we're doing here today. So a little background on you. You were one of my students at the Second City in Chicago, but I think it was already remote at that point, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
I was going to say, I think I've only ever seen you on Zoom. And so you had the greatest set I've ever heard on your religious experiences growing up. Your comedy writing involving your experiences was just so good. It was so solid. It was so poignant. And I felt like we related on a lot of levels. I remember we would talk in front of the class about certain things and they wouldn't believe us either. So I knew the minute you reached out and responded to that ad that I put on Facebook, I knew immediately that I had to have you on here. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and what you're about, and feel free to just kind of kick it off.
Yeah, I remember it was funny in that class because I remember there are things that, usually I'm not so open about, but I'll be like, Sydney knows it's true. Tell everyone it's true.
Yes.
This stuff really happens.
Yep.
Yeah. So I actually am a creative for a living. I'm a writer. I direct brand films. I work in tech, doing strategic storytelling. Won a couple awards for it. It's something that I really love to do because I think stories are powerful. I think sharing what you've been through, stories from your own life, I think it's how we understand each other better. It's how we learn lessons. And I think it helps you to be more thoughtful about the experiences you've had in your life and also that other people have had in their life that maybe you weren't exposed to. I think it's such a valuable way to live your life, telling, exchanging, listening, sharing stories.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's that. And to that end, and I also podcast. I'm going through a divorce. It's about to be final.
Yay!
Yeah, I'm happy about that. It's been a 2-year journey on that front, but something that I found is it's so isolating, especially during COVID. And so I had a couple girlfriends that have also been through divorce, and we found so much strength in each other, sharing our stories with each other.
Right.
And we decided to take it public. So we started a podcast about that called Thirsty, where we share dating stories. I think it's pretty funny. And then we also talk about what we learned. And then today we're going to talk about, so I grew up, it's called Charismatic Evangelicalism. So a charismatic evangelical. So I grew up that way in a big family. And I went to a mega church in Dallas, Texas, the most mega of mega churches.
Like the mega city of mega churches.
Yeah. I think there's a statistic out there that Texas is known for having the most per capita mega churches and strip joints.
I believe it. I believe it.
It's so weird. Go to the strip joint and then go, say I'm sorry to God the next day. But so anyway, we grew up charismatic evangelical, and what that means, and it was non-denominational. So we came off of anyone who grew up in church is going to know what all this means. I'm going to try to explain it so that everybody understands.
Yes.
But it came out of Southern Baptist. So Southern Baptist is a denomination. It is recognized. It is, there's a whole organization. They have principles, they have rules, they hold each other accountable. My church was not that. It was like an offshoot. It was an offshoot that someone, because you can just start a church, right? Anybody can just start a church. And so that's what happened at mine. So they started their own place, non-denominational. We were not attached.
Did they start their own because they didn't like the rules of the previous church? Is that kind of a Protestant Catholic situation?
Yeah. Well, I remember the reason why. So some of this I'll just be real open about, but I just want to make clear that I don't believe any of this anymore. But the way they used to talk about, a big part of my church was the worship session. Because usually when you go to church, you will have worship, and then you'll have a talk, a sermon of some sort. And the way they talked about is that Baptists they had this term called dead churches. And they felt like everyone who wasn't charismatic evangelical was a dead church, meaning that worship was like just hymns. It was like quiet, very like held back, sedate. And so they call that being a dead church. So you were really encouraged during worship. I'm sure everyone's heard of like Hillsong and have seen those churches that have like light shows, and they have like a whole music group and microphones, and it's like it's a concert. And so that's how they did it. Because they felt like you really need to, you are in a relationship with Jesus. Not romantic or anything, but like there's a give and take, a back and forth, and that you need to express how you feel so that you can feel it and all of that.
Yeah.
So
I feel like that's something that people who didn't grow up in the Christian church might not understand, is there is this whole, that's one of the things I found similar between all of the different chapters and sects and offshoots, is that relationship with Jesus. And I have had people ask me, especially people who are, say, for example, Jewish, they'll be like, wait, you're in a relationship with God? And you're like, no, it's different. Each person has their own personal relationship with him. It's like a counselor. You're supposed to kind of check in with him and build this narrative with him on your own that's going to be different than somebody else's. But it is interesting that they continue to call it the relationship, because it does sound like a kind of like marital thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's how they frame praying. It's how they frame, you're supposed to talk about what's on your mind. Like he's your friend. Like it's really supposed to be treated like he's your friend, almost like you have a Slack channel going with God at all times. Chat.
Yeah.
So that was kind of where they started. And worship was big, charismatic. The reason it's called that is because there were speaking in tongues, there were banners, interpretive dance. Everything's big, very Texan.
Yes. Everything is bigger than Texas, even the tongues.
Yes. Yeah. So speaking in tongues. Oh, I almost forgot about getting slain in the spirit. And that's when you're so overcome with your love for Jesus that you just fall over.
I've never heard it called slain.
Slain in the spirit. That's what it's called.
I have heard washed in the blood of the Lamb. That's what we say.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. We are all washed in the blood of the Lamb. So that's what worship was like. It was just very, it was a whole production. And I know at my church took forever. So in most churches that are, like if you go to Episcopalian church, which if I were to go back to Jesus, I think I'd probably go with Episcopalian. I like their style the best, or Methodist. But in the church I grew up in, worship would go as long as 2 hours, 2.5 hours straight, just with songs. Whereas at most churches, it's maybe you do a few songs, do a sermon, and you're in and out in an hour. Unless you go to Sunday school. And that's just not how it was. It was an all day affair, really. Like we would go to church, sing, dance, fall over, slain in the spirit, speak in tongues, pray on each other. Like it's very common during worship for someone to come up to you and say, I feel like God's telling me that you need prayer. Can I lay hands on you and pray for you?
Yes.
It's very normal.
Yeah.
Very normal.
For people who aren't who aren't maybe as familiar, when people say they want to lay hands on you, they literally want to lay hands on you and then pray for you, and people kind of circle around you. I don't know if anybody's still doing that with COVID, but I know before COVID that was a big thing.
Well, I think they are because I know, so I still have a lot of friends from church. We all grew up, and finally, a lot of us have chosen a different path as grown-ups. But yeah, so I think in current times, the Christian church to a degree has felt, and I don't agree with this, but they had felt persecuted by COVID things. It's like it's a pandemic, guys. Laying hands is
Yeah,
not really a great idea.
that was a very interesting outcome of COVID that I personally did not expect, was how many people are going to try to turn it into a religious attack.
Yeah, like trying to make it seem like they were persecuted. And I don't know, for me, I know it's getting a little off topic, but like it is hard for me to hear that because I know in our church, at least, and I don't know how much of this was church and how much of this was Texas and how much of it was that our church was majority white. Right. We experienced, my family is mostly not white, is mostly not abled. And it was like constant, like people would want to lay their hands on you because you're in a wheelchair. I want to pray for Jesus to heal you. And like, that's really offensive actually to someone who uses a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Or they would say things, the church has just been such a part about persecuting people who are not straight or who are not white. That it's hard for me to hear that because it's like they play a pretty major role in persecuting other people. It's like, I don't think you know what persecuting is. To be told, you should stay 6 feet apart, don't touch each other so you don't get sick, and maybe go to the hospital. Like, I don't think that's being persecuted,
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like that, how they say, speak to people how they speak to you, and they suddenly won't like it. I feel like it's very similar in the churches that are known to persecute people. They're often the ones that are the first to kick and scream about being persecuted. And you're just kind of like, which came first though? Like which started it? I'm curious.
Yeah. And your threshold for withstanding correction is a lot lower than what you expect to be able to put on other people.
Right.
So that's a big part. Another thing we talked about a lot was revival. That was a big part of the charismatic denomination. Because there'd be times when the spirit, it's called having the spirit moving in the congregation. And sometimes it would go on for days. And so for high school, I was homeschooled until high school, but for high school, I went to our church school, which is what most people did. They either homeschooled or went to the church school. It was, those two choices. And so I remember we would have church in school every day. And once in a while, revival would hit. The kids were getting all wrapped up and excited during worship time. And so they would just cancel classes for a couple of days. And we would just do church.
So what is revival? If you had to define it, what is that?
So if revival hit, that would mean people were getting really emotional. It's really very connected to that charismatic term is very foundational to that entire sect. So what would happen is we might be having a church service, a normal church service, and you would just feel it. People were getting a little more amped up. They were a little more emotional. More people would be praying in tongues. Spirit of prophecy would be hitting.
Revival could come whenever it wanted. It wasn't like a scheduled.
No.
Got it.
No, it was just, when the spirit moves you. So that might happen. And then, a lot of times people would feel, they would get it's called a word from God. And it might be prophetic. It might be a testimony. Like you had an epiphany about something in your life or something you want to think about, or you had some sort of spiritual breakthrough. They really believe in the power of testimony, which is also storytelling, like sharing something that they discovered about themselves, something they went through that they learned a lesson, or if they just felt like God had put something on their heart.
Yeah.
And so they would talk about that. And so they would just keep it. There were just times it was very noticeable. So then they would just keep it going as long as the spirit was moving. And sometimes the spirit moved for days at a time. And now, people went home and went to bed, but, but they would say, you know what, we're going to keep going tomorrow. Anyone who wants to come back. And most people would. People would. And it would even happen in school with students with all the, kids are very emotional by ourselves. And ours was small. Like I think there were 24 kids in my grade for the most part through high school.
That's honestly more than I expected. I thought you were going to say maybe there were 5 or 6. That's pretty good size.
Yeah, there were about 24. I would say it was a first grade through 12th grade school. And I believe most classes were between 18 and 25 in each grade. Yeah. The slain in the spirit thing was when you knew it was really off the chain. That was like the marker of it was really big. Yeah. I mean, now I'm like remembering things I haven't thought about in a long time. And at times it was really good. And other times people would just be crying. Some people would just be silent and praying. A lot of churches had a prayer center, which is, it might be a different building or it might be a specified room. And at our church, it was open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you could just go there and pray. You just go and pray. Other people will be there praying. It was set aside as like a dedicated quiet space to go pray, talk to Jesus about what you've had going on in your life. Those were big things that were a part of it. Church was a huge part of our life. And I think that's true for a lot of people that are in more orthodox or more fundamentalist religions. Like we went 3 times a week. We went Wednesday nights. We go to Wednesday nights for a service. Saturday nights would be like youth group, like more fun things, more casual. And then everybody would come together in the main auditorium it's called a word, and they do like a mini worship and then, have a word from whatever pastor, because it's a team of pastors. There's a head pastor and then a bunch of others. Yeah. And one of the pastors from the team would speak. And then Sunday was like the big one, where you go and it's there for hours and then you go get donuts on the way home. That's usually how that worked.
Now, you talk about not really being religious anymore. Was your separation from religion gradual? Was there a moment? Was there an event? How did you kind of realize, I guess, that you weren't necessarily on board with everything that you were hearing and learning?
I think to a degree it was gradual. And I think it kind of, I think it took me maybe a period of totally 10 years to totally ramp off. There was a spurring event. So my family is weird. I'm sure we're going to get into that, but my family is weird. It's huge. I have 21 siblings, combination of bio siblings and through adoption. I know, so many. It's too many. Don't do that. The weird thing about my family, so we're already in a weird church, and then we're weird within the church because I have a million siblings. And bigger families are normal in that format. But when I say big, I mean like maybe 6 kids.
Yeah.
And we were like a huge, huge family. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but a lot of us, they didn't know it, but are not straight as adults, because of, I think, how we grew up. They didn't know until they were older, but it was starting to be a little obvious. Yeah. A lot of them are not straight. Most of them have a disability of some sort, that is very visible. A lot of them, most of us are not white. We're from all over the world, all over the country, all races, ethnicities. And a lot of the things I was hearing from the pulpit, just more and more just did not jive with my heart. So a lot of being involved in fundamentalist church this is how it is. And you're kind of taught, or not kind of, you are taught to not follow your heart. Like if your heart's saying something different from what the church is teaching, you're wrong.
Yeah. It's the devil's temptation.
Yeah. It's of the devil and you're just wrong. And there's a big phrase, and it's taken me a little bit of a minute to explain all this, but there's a phrase called of the devil. And so it might, and I'm being serious. I know it sounds so funny, but it's like real and it's a serious phrase. Like when people say it's serious, where a lot of times the instincts are a little voice in your heart that says, I don't know about this thing I'm being taught about how being gay is wrong. And this little part of you is like, I don't know about that. And you're just taught you're wrong. That's of the devil. It doesn't matter what you think. The church says that's of the devil and that's just final. Right. So you push a lot of those things down. But however, just more and more, I was just having more and more trouble as I got older. The things I was hearing specifically in sermons, and seeing the way my siblings were getting, it's easy for me. I'm white. I do not have a disability. So I didn't personally experience it, but I saw what was going on with my siblings at the church. Yeah. And I didn't like it. And just more and more, I would hear things from the pulpit that I just did not feel comfortable with. And I think there was one day, and I remember it very clearly, the pastor was giving a word on Sunday morning, and I have to figure out how to tell a story without using the actual slur, but he was talking about, just imagine if your daughter, and of course he's white, if your daughter came home and brought home and then he used a slur for someone who is from a Middle Eastern country. And I just sat there.
No.
Yeah. And I was done at that point. I was like, this is wrong. Like all those tiny little voices, you know, when things happen here and there, where you're like, I don't know about that. Suddenly that gave me that moment. I know that's wrong. I
Yeah. Yeah.
know that's wrong.
Absolutely.
And that
Absolutely.
just was, I don't know, it just broke something in my heart when that happened. I was like, I don't want to be a
Yeah.
part of this. I do not want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think I was like 16 or something.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
when I went to college on purpose, I went as far away from my community as possible. Not because I had any big feelings up. I just wanted to experience something totally
Yeah.
different.
Something different.
Yeah. And I came up to Chicago to theater school here at DePaul. And that's a great way to beat that stuff out of you. Because I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. Oh,
it's
yeah.
theater school. Like everyone's very out there about all of their feelings. And it was a
Yep.
conservatory program. So most, DePaul does a really good job of bringing together students from all over the world, all different backgrounds. And so I just was exposed to all these things I never thought about before. You know, I was
Yep.
super pro-life. And then I mean, God love the girls in my dorm, my freshman dorm, because they would sit down with me and be like, this is wrong. Pro-life is wrong because of this. Why are you saying this? That's not okay. God love them because they had to have taken so much patience to educate this, you know, dumb little white girl from Texas that had all these opinions that were wrong. They were
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
And just so focused and centering of certain, you know, because you really are taught in evangelical circles that you're right and everybody else is wrong.
Right.
You know, you need to bring everybody into the fold. It's the law. Everyone who's not in your church is a lost sheep.
Yes.
And I'm not
Yes.
making up any of these terms. These are real
No.
terms that are
No, these are
widely
real.
used.
Yeah. These are absolutely real. Yeah.
So that's really where it started. I would say when that pastor said that slur that one day in church and then going to theater school, and I just started to see everything totally differently.
Yes.
And you know, now I'm spiritual. I'm not part of any organ, and I'm actually not anti-religion. I'm not.
Ooh.
I had a bad experience with it, but I know it resonates for a lot of people, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
But I think I found a way to be deeply spiritual, but without, but where I feel like I trust myself, and I feel like, you know, I'm just not cool with racism and homophobia and all that. I'm not
Right.
cool with that. So
Right.
finding an area where that all jives, but I still find spirituality and meaning in
Right.
everyday life, that works for me.
Right. I've noticed that, you know, I also grew up in like a very religious area, and I've noticed people kind of in our generation are very much in the mind of either not religious at all or they're spiritual, but their problem lies within the organization of religion. You know,
Yeah.
like they don't necessarily disagree that, you know, obviously I like to call the 10 commandments just reasonable advice, because it's like, I notice they're all laws as well. Like, don't kill people, don't sleep with your neighbor's wife, like just don't.
Those are good. Good.
Yeah, it's reasonable advice, but I think they understand that either some of them don't believe anything religious at all, or some of them believe that there is like a higher power or some kind of spirituality out there, but they don't agree with the actual rules of whatever religion it was they grew up in, whether it was Catholic or Baptist.
Yeah.
I remember, so when I was growing up, my mom used to call us religion whores, which I'm like, as I'm older, I'm like, I can't believe she said whore in front of a 10-year-old, because we were always going to different churches all the time. We ended up going to one for a long time. And I ended up going there with the Duggars, which was pretty neat. It's going to be my claim to fame for the rest of my life. But I remember we went to an Anglican church. We went to a Catholic church once. We went to a Roman Catholic church once. Still not quite sure what the difference is. We went to like a Polish Orthodox church once. We went to a bunch of different churches. But we started going to this one church very regularly. And I remember one day the pastor got up and he taught a whole lesson on how women should not preach. And women's job is to be silent at the feet of their husband, and not to be, you know, not to speak about religion when unspoken to, and to allow their husbands to lead the household in faith and blah, blah, blah. And I remember, I think I was maybe 10. And I remember on the car ride home, I asked my mom, I was like, hey, do you think that that's true, what he was saying about like girls being quiet? Because my mom is very independent, fiercely independent. She taught me everything I know about, you know, kicking ass and taking names. So I was surprised to see her sitting there when he was saying these things. And she said to me, she's like, you know how sometimes whenever we hang out with some family members, they say some things that are kind of crazy, but we don't tell them they're crazy, but we know they're crazy. And I was like, yeah. And she goes, yeah, church can be like that too sometimes. She goes, so what do you feel in your heart? Do you think that you would be able to help somebody come to the Lord? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And she goes, well, then I think that's what the truth is. She said, I think God has his own truth with each person. And if that's true to you, then I think that's what God would do for you. But I remember she was like, yeah, you know how sometimes you're not allowed to tell them they sound crazy because you want to be nice, but yeah.
That's so Southern.
Yeah.
Telling you, I totally disagree with you.
Yeah. She was very politely saying like, yeah, that was batshit bananas. I don't know what that was back there, you know?
That's so good that she gave you that. Correction's not the right word. Clarification.
Yeah. That explanation I thought was very helpful.
Well, and that's a good segue too into, there's a lot of that talk about women being submissive. You know, that's a big thing that women are supposed to submit to their husbands, and you know, it's all heteronormative. You're supposed to be married to a man and you're supposed to be submissive to that person. He is the head of the household, not you. And it's kind of interesting as like, I feel like that was the easier sell maybe 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. And now a lot of women struggle with that. A lot of men struggle with that too. They're like, and I think what's funny about it is, well, it's not funny, but something I think is interesting is that a lot of times that subject does come up pretty commonly, and you'll see, I don't know, to me, it feels like kind of dancing around it. Like, well, that's not what submission really means. Like, yeah, it does. That is what it means.
It is.
And it's wrong. It's wrong.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting.
You definitely run into people, I've noticed, who take a verse from the Bible that is incredibly blatant about what it means. And they say, well, that's not what they mean. It's an interpretation. And I struggle with that a lot because, for example, I grew up with a girl and she is now a pastor. And growing up, she was always very, very, the Bible says, the Bible says, the Bible says. And her dad was a pastor too. And so if you did anything, she would always tell you like, oh, but the Bible says this, but the Bible says that. Yeah. And she became a pastor. And I noticed the comments on her status were a combination of, oh my gosh, congrats. And wait a second. I'm so sorry, but I thought women shouldn't preach. And she got down in the comments and she was like, well, no, that's like this interpretation. What they really mean is, and people just started copying and pasting direct Bible verses that were like, women should not be at the pulpit. Women should not preach. Women should not. And it was just very interesting because I remember kind of being like the Michael Jackson popcorn meme, not saying anything, just watching this go down. But to me, you have to either admit that the Bible is nothing but fables, like Aesop's fables, that we're supposed to look at ambiguously and take from it what we want, or it is the literal truth, verbatim happened. Women really did come from a man's rib. There really was a flood that flooded everything in the whole wide world. You know, there really was Sodom and Gomorrah. The woman really did turn into a pillar of salt. Like I don't think you should be able to say God hates gays when, by the way, that never shows up in the Bible. That never shows up in the Bible.
That's actually not in the Bible.
That's not in the Bible at all. God says nothing about abortion in the Bible ever.
Right.
But at the same time, you get to wear mixed fabrics and eat pork because that was just an interpretation.
Which is in the Bible. Yeah.
Right. So that's the only issue that I have is when people claim that they are verbatim staunch by the Bible, but then they don't treat their body like a temple. They do eat pork. They do wear mixed fabrics. They do eat shellfish. You know, I don't know anybody who eats bats, so I think we're all safe there. But, you know, to me, it's like you either have to admit that you don't know everything and that you're just winging it, or literally do what it says. Stone your daughter in the streets for not being a virgin. You know, like do what it says.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I could talk about that for days because I know for me growing up, there's such a disconnect between what your heart says, what your spirit says, and then like this legalistic side. And it's just so, now I'm thinking, I mean, it's at the root of it. It's like, this is what the Bible says. These are the rules. You need to just follow them, but it doesn't match your heart. And it doesn't match the reality we see out there. And I don't know how you bring those two things together, which is, I think why I struggle with it now as an ex-fundamentalist. It's not realistic. It's not like, you know, like they'll be very free with things. Like I remember a big term in church is love the sinner, hate the sin. which that's
Yes.
probably something I struggle with the most now as a grown up when people still say it. Cause a lot of times when that's used is when someone who has, sinned, quotation marks, whether it's getting pregnant out of wedlock or having sex when you're not married, which is everyone, by the way. And, things like that, where they're like, we love you, but your sin is terrible. And then sometimes, a lot of times they will apply it to who you are. Like, I know my siblings who are not straight really struggle with that. That's a lot of times how it's applied.
I've only ever heard it applied, honestly, to homosexuality.
Yeah. And it's just so unrealistic. And of course, it's coming from some straight person. They'll say things like, well, just don't date women, don't date men, don't date, outside of a heteronormative situation. And then you're fine. Then you're in compliance with the Bible. And I'm just like, are you kidding? Like, you really expect someone to not have love in their life for the rest of their life? A, that sounds terrible. B, you first. And C, like, that's just,
you first, first of all.
Yeah. Like, in what universe do you think that's even possible? Like, that's so unrealistic. And just that, like, white knuckling to things like that, I really struggle with, because it's like, that's not reality. It's not. And the whole thing of being there's so many phrases, be in the world, but not of it. There's a lot of good things out there in the world. I'm sorry. And a lot of it is not all Christian. It's not. And that's okay. That's really okay. Like, we're not necessarily right. We're about a lot of things. And I think that's true of any human being. And I think the biggest thing you can do is be vulnerable and able to listen and find value in other people's points of view, even if it's not something you're going to do in your own life. But it doesn't mean someone who is Muslim or not religious at all, or not straight or not white, it doesn't mean they don't have many valuable things to say. And sorry, you're not better than them. You're really not.
Right. And something that I think, I had a very similar experience to you, where I went to college and I just politically, religiously, a lot of things changed because I noticed, I don't remember if somebody pointed it out to me or if I just noticed it, that when anybody would ask me why I believed something that I believed, which is a good question, right? I would view it as like a personal attack. As opposed to answering the question, it would become like, how dare you? How dare you? Right. And I was in debate when I was in college, and, very like research. Like, I got scholarships based on research. And I remember thinking one day, like, I have to know the facts in order to vote a certain way. I want to do the research to know what kind of diet I want to be on. I have to have research in, purchases that I make. So why is it that I don't require any research or any facts or any evidence whatsoever when it comes to eternal salvation? Arguably the biggest part of it, like, you know what I mean? And that's kind of when I started to question exactly how much I believed or what I believed or how strongly I felt about certain religious experiences, just because it didn't make sense to me that every aspect of my life I was encouraged and like applauded by those adults around me by being like, oh, so smart, so evidence-based, like, you're always doing research, you're always looking things up. But then when it came to this, it was like, no, stop, put that away, like, stop, don't do that.
Already been decided.
Like that was kind of it for me. I don't know if you had like a similar.
Yeah. Like, I remember too, like, it was funny. This was towards the tail end when I was like, I really don't feel good. Like, I couldn't, like, there's this whole emphasis on evangelizing. Like, you want to go to heaven. You want all your friends to go to heaven. How sad would it be if they went to hell? Like, and that's real. It was I'm not overblowing, and this is verbatim, the kind of conversation. Like, do they want to burn in hell forever? Yeah. I remember at the tail end, I really had a little bit of a crisis because this is how ingrained it was my whole life, all of, and I even went to church for like a minute when I came to college, and then I was like, oh, this is not working. But 18 years of being told that if you don't have Jesus in your life, you're going to hell, like straight out on a regular basis. And I remember at the end, I literally had this feeling of, am I okay taking a chance that I'm not going to go to heaven because I'm not part of church anymore? And I know it sounds so silly, but like, I literally was very worried about that. Like, my eternal, it's called you may remember the term. It's like your eternal damnation.
Yeah. There was like eternal salvation and eternal damnation.
Yes. Yeah. So thinking about like, I know it sounds so funny probably to other people who didn't grow up that way, but it was real to me. I remember I came
Yeah.
home from college after my sophomore year and I'd started, I waited a real long time. I didn't even have sex with anyone till after college. I waited so long, but all because of my upbringing. And we were a no alcohol church.
Oh,
So, and I was in theater school.
well, you made
Theater.
it all the way through theater school and didn't bang anybody?
Yeah.
How's that even possible?
Well, I mean, I made out like PG makeouts around the face. I made out with like pretty much every man in my
Yeah.
circle
Yeah.
and a few girls. But yeah. So yeah, somehow I got all the way through theater school. I remember even like you do yoga in theater school. That's part of it. And I was like, oh God, I'm gonna let the evil spirits in. And I know it sounds so funny, but I literally I was worried about those things. I was worried about those things. I was worried about my eternal salvation. I was worried about all my classmates who were 100% sinning all the time. And it looked very fun. I was like,
Yeah, it always looked fun. Yeah.
yeah. But I remember like I did start late. So I didn't drink until I was 20. I didn't even have an alcoholic drink until I was 20. My first one was a strawberry daiquiri. Second was an amaretto sour because that's how it goes. Drink the worst drinks first. But I remember coming home from college and I would just cry because theater school, we're out, like we work our asses off, but then we also are all great friends. I still love all those guys. I had a great college experience, and partied and hung out and had friends, but I would come home and feel so guilty. And like, I remember one night I was like hiding under my covers. My dad was like, what's wrong with you? I was like, Dad, I've been drinking and out having fun. And it just like, I feel really I'm a bad person. And like, he was like, well, you can do better. Like, it wasn't like, it's okay. You're in college. You're a good kid. You're having fun. It was, well, you need to stop that. But I just felt like all this guilt, and like, I remember looking around and all these kids were so free and having fun. I mean, not all of it was great, but I felt like I was too far over in this, like sitting in a corner, watching everybody live their life.
Yes, 100%. Like that. I again, like kind of like you asked before, I'm trying to figure out what part of this is Southern and what part of this is Southern religious. Cause I grew up in Arkansas as well. So that's like, and honestly, I wonder a lot of times if there really is a difference, like
I don't know.
Because a lot of these religions are so rooted in Southern culture that I honestly think it's pretty much the same thing. But I do remember it would be, you would see people having fun, having a good time, like innocent fun, not doing lines of Coke or whatever, just having innocent fun. And you would be so torn between participating or being like, this is what they always warned me about. This is it. This is the time they warned me about. Abstain. But then I don't know, did you ever notice, I don't know if you ever experienced this, did you ever feel like because of your religious beliefs, you almost acted a little cavalier, like you almost, in hindsight, you almost acted kind of like better than people when you didn't realize that's what you were doing. But now in hindsight, now that you're who you are today, you're like, oh, I absolutely thought I was better than all those people.
I was just a little, not a jerk. Like, it's not like I talked about it, but on the inside, I did think I was better than everybody else.
I did. Yeah.
I'm not drinking. I'm not sleeping. I'm not having sex out of marriage. I'm not doing any drugs at all whatsoever. Like all those, I on the inside, I think I did think I was better, even though like I loved my friends. I really did. But I think that's what it's
But you
rooted
loved
in.
the sinner and hated the sin.
That is exactly what I was doing, which is so ridiculous. But yeah, I think it's kind of built in, or not kind of, it is on purpose built into you growing up in church in 18 years of it, that you are better than everyone else. They need to become like you. Like that is the very clear message that is sent.
Right. Or if you keep acting the way you're acting, they'll notice and they'll want to act like that too. I feel like that was another big message, just like keep it up and be that friend in the friend group and everyone will want to be like you. That's how you can lead them. No, that's not true. People will talk about you behind your back like you're a goody two shoes, and then they'll talk to you in front of your face like you're a goody two shoes.
Yeah. I mean, I think about like what makes me want to be like someone else, and it's how they treat people. It's how it's other things. It's not the fact that they live a legalistic lifestyle, or whatever. Like that's not what makes me want to be like you. It's how you treat people. It's your values, things you're good at, things you want to be good at, the way you approach your life. So I just had it all wrong. Right. I do remember, this is something I've talked about. I have a couple other friends that grew up in similar formats, purity culture. which
Yes.
was really, really heavy. I had a promise ring. A lot of girls I know, and boys too, but it focused on the girls because you're in charge of that apparently. I know I
Yep.
sound so bitter, and I'm not. It's just like now as an adult, and I'm thinking about, I'm like, whoo, that is so far away from my life now.
Right. And it's such a heavy conversation to be steeping children in. That's the thing, is like, whether somebody agrees with it or not, they have to at least admit that that is a very heavy message to send at such a young age, that basically the way you dress and the way you behave gives permission for people to do things. And if you don't want them to have that permission, you need to start by following these rules.
Yeah. Well, and this is I have a lot to say. This might be a little bit heavy, but I think it's kind of important to say, like,
Yes.
Yeah, that message is sent to all little girls. I remember I had a promise ring, and the talk that I was given was, you need to court, not date, which means all of your hanging out with someone has a chaperone and there's no physical contact, maybe hold hands. That's it. Maybe a very like PG, maybe even G-rated kiss on the lips. That is it. Nothing else. And that was your commitment to that until you got married. And a lot of girls had those promise rings, and a few boys. And it was just a very strong and abstinence education. And I remember being lined up in my school hallway, and the principal would pull out a ruler because you could only have your skirt be, I think, an inch above your knees. And so they would and it didn't happen to the boys. It was only the girls. They would come out and with a ruler, measure how short your skirt was. And the message was very strong. Don't tempt the boys. Don't tempt the boys. And again, I do want to be very cognizant and say this, that I recognize all of this is heteronormative framing, because they just pretended everything else didn't exist. Mm-hmm. But that was the message we got. It was boys. You need to not tempt boys. Don't, they can't control themselves. It's on you to be modest, cover everything up. I wish I had a picture. Like, I was so covered up all the time, and had a perm, of course, but it's, hilarious to me now. But that you felt like this responsibility, for the boys, like, oh no, they're going to think I'm cute. I am cute. Like, that's not bad to be cute.
Yeah. They have
my
eyeballs.
body. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with women's bodies. Like, I'm sorry, there's not. And so that was really deeply ingrained. Abstinence, just don't have sex. There were a couple girls that like, it was found out they had sex, or a couple of them got pregnant. They got expelled. They got shamed and expelled from school. Wow. Which now I'm just like, wow, why would you do that? That's so wrong. A girl has this big thing happen in her life, and, oh yeah, you're done with education. Get out.
Yeah. Wow. Like you followed a biological calling that your body has had from a millennia of other bodies having that same biological calling, and we don't want to teach you anything anymore.
Yeah. And I can say one thing that I know, it impacted a lot of my girlfriends as adults, because we've talked about it. So there were two big ways that this impacted me. Well, three. So I didn't have sex until I was, I think, 22 or 23. I waited a really long time. And when I did finally start having sex, I was dating one guy who I actually still talk to from time to time. He was just the most angel person. And he was in Texas. So he knew how we grew up. He knew what had happened. He also was not buying it anymore. But I cried every single time we had sex. Every single time. He would just be like, is this church stuff, or are you upset? And I was like, it's church stuff.
Is it something I did, or something the church did?
Yeah. And I've heard that from a lot of girls. Like, some of the girls that I know that actually did wait till they were married to have sex, which that's fine. That was their choice. But they actually had a lot of trouble, like, reprogramming themselves, because you've been taught for so long, don't be attractive, don't be cute, don't be tempted. You just, like, they say that they're not saying that, but that's what that means, that sex is wrong and bad and gross. There's actually and you can Google it. There's this lesson that teachers use in school where they'll bring in a tray of cupcakes to a group. It's girls, only girls. And they will take a bite out of one cupcake, and they'll say, oh, we're having cupcake day. They'll take a bite and be like, oh, do you want this cupcake? And they'll offer this bitten out cupcake to everyone in the class. And of course, we're like, no, I'm okay. And she says, that's what it's like when you have sex before you get married. Your husband's not going to want you because you've already had a bite taken out of you. And so, like, that sends a very particular message. And I'm not the only one. A lot of girls I know, like, had huge sexual issues when they got married or when they got into a relationship, of like trying to reprogram themselves that you're not dirty. Like, it's okay.
Yeah. It's like, don't do this ever. It'll ruin your life. It'll send you to hell. You're married now. Do it. What do you mean you don't want to do it? Why haven't you
Yeah.
done it yet?
Right. Like,
It's like,
you know, a whole lifetime of living the other way. It's like, how that doesn't work, you know, and
yeah.
it's just does so much damage. And the other way it impacted me, and this was pretty serious, is I was assaulted actually when I was in college. And, you know, it's funny. I didn't realize it was an assault until 15 years later because it was so programmed into me because I was, you know, the whole thing was getting started. I said, no, I don't want to do that. And he said, well,
Yeah.
I want to. And I
Yeah.
went along with it because you know what? Men are in charge. I'm
Yep.
supposed to like make them where they don't want to have sex with me. So it's my fault.
Yeah.
You know, I looked too cute. You know, I didn't, you know, I deserve this. And I'm not kidding. I really thought it was like a normal thing. I know it sounds so counterintuitive. And I think when people make judgments about assault and rape and those kinds of things, that they just have no idea. They have no idea how it actually works. And it's not that simple.
Yeah.
And for a number of women that grew up the way I did, or, you know, like you think they're allowed, they're entitled to your body. And I really thought that. And then 15 years later, I was like, oh my God, that was an assault. Actually,
Yeah.
I didn't want that to happen.
You're basically told like, because they didn't jump you in an alley, it's not rape. Like people just think, you know, because of the movies, it's like, oh, you're walking alone in an alley and you get jumped. Like that's how it happens. No, usually it's like somebody you're in a committed relationship who just doesn't want to take no for an answer. Or who's just going to keep saying like, come on, come on, come on.
Yeah. And that happened to a lot of my girlfriends. Like it really, I mean, you know, assault is, you know, along the range, it's super common. It happens to most people, most women.
Yep.
Yeah. And I really blame purity culture for part of it because I was on a date and I was doing more than I should have, you know, like it was all my fault. Like I very clearly said, well, I stepped out of what church told me. It's my fault that this happened. It's my fault. If I would have been behaving, that wouldn't have happened to me. This is my fault. Well, it wasn't. It absolutely wasn't. So I think that, I don't know, there's so many things wrong with purity culture. And something that people may have heard of, may not. There are things called father-daughter dances, which I think those can be fun. But I think sometimes within the church, it becomes your dad is in charge of your maidenhood a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was 18, I got in the car with my mom and I don't know what inspired her to have this conversation with me. I think it's because I was like going away to college, but she looks at me and she's like, okay, so I know your whole entire life, I've told you can't have sex before marriage. And I was like, where is this going? She's like, but I need to tell you something. She's like, the world is a different place than it was when I got married. Cause she and my dad were both virgins when they got married. And she's sworn since then that that's why so many people attended, because they'd never seen two virgins get married. But she's like, the world is different. She's like, and you don't want to marry somebody you've never had sex with. She's like, but she's like, at least wait till you're, I don't know, 25 and try living with them first before you get married. And I remember just being like, what's going on? Like, who is this? You're not my mom. Like, I want my mom back. Cause like, she even told me, she's like, you know, cause of where we live and like the religion and stuff. She's like, I have to tell you until you're an adult, you know, don't mess around with boys, be a good girl, you know, don't do drugs, don't sneak out of the house. She's like, but I also don't want you to marry somebody you've never been alone with, or you may not, you know, be physically compatible with. She's like, but I'm not allowed to tell you that when you're a kid. And I just remember being like,
it goes against everything you were taught.
Everything. I was like, how many more secrets should I unlock from this woman?
Your mom sounds hilarious. I mean, well, and good thing that she said all those things. I think if you're anytime you're part of organized religion, I mean, there's no way for anyone to agree with every single thing. And I think feeling empowered and to have that agency to say, in our family, we're a little different, I think that should be okay. And that's awesome that your mom was able to do that.
The only thing is that I wish people were louder about that. I wish it wasn't a conversation that we were having when I'm 18 in the car. You know, I wish that was a conversation had, you know, I know that it's a long shot to say a conversation had in church, but I think it's kind of like how people complain that we're never taught how to do taxes and stuff in school. And that's the kind of stuff we should focus on. I think also there should be a focus, if you're going to raise your family within the faith, there should be a focus on realistic ideations. You know what I mean? Like somebody brought up to me once, they're like, in the Bible, they didn't even know what glasses were. You know, like if there were glasses back then, they'd probably have some scripture about what you can do with those too, but they didn't. They didn't know it existed. So things are different now. And I wish that kind of, because I'm willing to bet that if you got a bunch of fundamentalist Christian people in a room and then you separated them into their own like police interrogation rooms, you would find that they all actually are a lot less conservative and convinced and religious than you thought. It's kind of like whenever you get another one of your Democrat friends in a room alone and you're like, okay, let's talk about how like some crazy shit we don't agree with, you know, even though we call ourselves Democrats.
Right.
I think you would find that the majority of the reason very strong religious ideology works is because they've convinced people that everyone thinks that and they're the only ones that don't, so they better keep it to themselves. And this isn't even an insult on religion at all, because I have lots of friends and family who are still very staunch religious, and they're some of the greatest people I've ever met. But I do think that, one, if they actually were candid with me, they would share a lot of beliefs that I have that are not quite in the church. And also, I think, again, with politics, with religion, with a lot of social beliefs, if people were given the chance, you would find that they actually think a lot about it, a lot more than you think, and they disagree with a lot more than you think, but it's just easier for them to go with the flow and to just pretend like they believe what everybody else is saying and just kind of roll their eyes in private. But they don't realize like what a harm that can do.
Yeah. Well, it sends a message to everybody else who, you know, on two layers. Like I do wish people that there was more of an ability to say how you feel and what you think, but there's a lot of pressure not to step out of line. Like I think it's been fairly well documented now. In church, they do talk a lot of politics. And you are there, you know who you're supposed to vote for. Don't step out of line, all of that. And you see it, like people that do step out of line, they get called in for counseling, you know, with the pastor, or they get excommunicated, they get thrown out. And you think about for people that can like just step in line. And then there are people that like, you know, are not straight. And like, it's clear that they're not straight. And then what are they supposed to do? No, there's no place for them.
Right.
You know, so I would have the privilege of pretending to go along with things, but some people can't. Like their existence is an affront to God, apparently. So it's, I that's something that I wish in church was more of a thing. I do wish people talked more about being realistic and honest about how they feel and what they think and connecting those two. Like I think your beliefs and how you feel and your values, like that can all be connected. They shouldn't be two totally separate things. I wish there was more room for what you feel, what you've learned as you go through your life, that it's not just here are the rules, do it, you know, because that's just so, I think, damaging for most people.
Yeah. I remember I was in the car once with somebody who had hired me as a comedian for an event. And it was for a campus ministry. And I vaguely knew this person. This was kind of the first time really having a conversation with them. And I remember they were talking about a friend they had that was going to school to be a pastor. And I said, oh, I have a friend who's going to school. He's in seminary to be a pastor. And I said, and I think it's really cool that he's in seminary and he's also gay. He's openly gay, but he's in seminary. And this guy gets really quiet and he goes, how does it make you feel that he's going to hell anyway? And I said, what? And he goes, how does it make you feel to know for a fact your friend's going to hell? And I was like, I don't feel that way. And this was back when I considered myself very staunchly religious. This was several years ago. And I said, I don't think he's going to hell. And he goes, well, the Bible says he's going to hell. Yeah. And I was like,
in line.
And I said, if he's going to seminary to lead people to the Lord and to teach people the message, I was like, don't you think one sin that he has is going to be fine? I was like, you have sins. And he got kind of upset about that. He's like, it's not the same. It's not the same. It's not the same. And I was like, well, doesn't it say somewhere in the Bible that sins are weighed equally, right? Like, isn't that kind of a belief that you have where all sins are sins? And then later on in that same conversation, I talked about, I think I mentioned something about a liquor store. And he goes, well, we don't have liquor stores here. He goes, we're a dry county, because we care about people's, lives, and we care about people's like walks with the Lord, and we refuse to have alcohol in this county. And I said, would it surprise you to find out that there's actually statistics have shown, this was at the time, I don't know what it is right now, but at the time, statistics had shown that innumerate numbers of alcohol related deaths were people going back home from leaving their dry county to go get hammered, and then they drive home drunk and then they die. And he's like, I don't know any statistics like that. And I was like, well, you should look them up. And he's like, I don't think so.
Well, yeah,
But
I mean, that's like the statistics with abortion too. Like the truth, the data says when you offer safe, legal abortion, and then access to birth control, abortion actually goes down because you're empowering women to make good decisions about their lives. But if they don't have access to, the abortions don't go down when you make it illegal. It just means more women die and more, like one of my siblings, he was born in a country where abortion is illegal, and his birth mother had some troubles, and she was pregnant and she tried to abort him herself. And he is now disabled for the rest of his life because of it. It was an unsuccessful abortion. He was born anyway, but with incredible disabilities that have impacted his life for the rest of his life. And that, to me, that's, as someone who grew up pro-life, and now I'm just like, wow, that just doesn't work. Like the outcome is actually much worse when you try to tell people how to live their lives.
Right.
To such a intimate degree.
Right.
And I think there has to be room for allowing people to have some power over their own lives and their own choices. You can't just fit into a box. And, that's part of what makes the world great, is be who you are, be proud of it. I'm not going to be not straight and pretend to be. I'm not going to, abortion is healthcare. Like there are so many women that have needed it for one reason or other, or they just wanted one. And you should really allow them to make their own choices. That's just always an interesting conversation to me. It's like, you can make abortion illegal. Guess what? The numbers aren't actually going to go down. They're not. Right. More women will die, and there will be some really awful outcomes, but it doesn't make it go away.
Right. Right. And if you are going to try and eliminate abortion, you can't also be in the same camp that wants to defund social programs that feed children and mothers. You have to pick one. If you truly are pro-life, be pro-life, don't be pro-birth, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Be pro the moment they're in this world, you're going to take care of them until they're an adult, right? That's because again, I don't have any issues with people I know very close to me that are pro-life. The only time I have an issue with that is when, one, they try to pass legislation to control what other people believe, and two, they also want to, if they also want to defund these programs that will then take care of that life. If you're going to be pro-life, be pro-life. If you're going to be pro-birth, at least use that word and say that you're pro-birth and that you don't actually care about what happens afterward. Right. Because again, and the reason I say I have no problem with that is because I know what it's like to be afraid you're going to hell over something. And so I don't have problems with people who are pro-life, because I know that they legitimately believe that that's the kind of behavior that will get you sent to hell. And they do believe that it is murder. And I know what that must feel like on the inside, that kind of fear that people are doing everything the Bible says not to, and what's that going to do to our world. Like I totally understand that fear when you're ingrained in that belief system, and how all you want to do is stop it from happening. But at the same time, you have to admit that if you're going to say that, then you also need to follow what you're saying and what you're believing all the way through, right? Like if you are in the camp that it is murder to have an abortion and that you are pro-life, you have to be in the camp that says, how are we going to feed this child? How are we going to educate this child? What are we going to do for their mother? And if you are pro-life, then you should actually be pro-birth control. Because if you don't want babies born into horrific, awful, expensive, situations, then you should be for the camp that they never combine that egg and that sperm to begin with.
Right. Yeah. But even that, I know I heard this a lot on birth control pills, because I think there's a 0.001% chance, when taken correctly, that you're going to get pregnant, and that there's an an abortive or something, like something I hear a lot. And I'm not a scientist. I'm not saying what I'm saying is correct. This is just what I see in, the friends I have there still in that church, that they will not use those birth control pills because there's a minute chance of, you may know the word abortive abortifacient, or it's a characteristic where you will abort the fertilized egg or whatever. I'll expel it from your body on this very tiny, tiny, tiny little chance. And for that reason, they will not take it. And it's just like, I don't know.
But also your body will do that.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
All the time. And they label it miscarriage.
Yeah.
Like your body will do that. So are you also anti, your own reproductive health, if that's the case? But yeah, and it's also very interesting to me, the people who I was talking to, somebody who was what do you call people who work in ambulances? I can't think of the word.
EMTs, paramedics.
Yeah. He was like an EMT. And we were talking about, politics, religion, stuff like that. And I said, at what point do you pronounce someone dead? And he said, when there is no heartbeat. And I said, so we agree that when there is no heartbeat, something is not alive. And he's like, whoa, wait. And I was like, no, you said that. You said that your personal definition is when there is no heartbeat, it is not alive.
Yeah. But yeah, and it's hard. It's hard to have those debate conversation or even like a normal conversation at all, because the mindset really is, when you're fundamentalist, these are the rules. Nothing else matters. It really doesn't. Yes. Science doesn't matter. New information doesn't matter. What people feel, what they experience does not matter.
Yeah. And if you disagree, we will move on without you.
Yeah. And it's funny, like you said, like some of these rules that are pervasive throughout fundamental religion, they're not even in the Bible. They're not in the Bible. It's just something the church decided.
It's just something a lot of people don't like.
Yeah. I mean, it's a cover up for being racist, sexist, homophobic, and just a jerk. Like that, right. That's just like the cover, the front. We are more moral. We are better than you. Which I think is why some people stay in it for a long time. Like their heart doesn't feel right about what's being said or decided, but they don't want to go to hell. And I know it sounds so crazy, but like legit, that is like a real thing people worry about.
Truly.
Yeah.
And I also think it's very interesting that our whole lives we're taught, question everything until it comes to religion. And then it's like, just trust, just believe, just trust, just believe. And do you find that it's difficult to maintain relationships with people who still are in the belief, or do you still have people that you're just as close to, or do you find that you have to be somebody different when you're with them?
I feel like it's hard on both sides for me, and I know talking to my siblings, they all feel that way too. And I'm over 40 and I still haven't exactly figured it out. People that are still living that way. Yeah. 43.
Really?
Old lady.
I thought we were way closer to the same age.
Mm-mm. Good skincare and a little Botox.
Yeah. And those red, what do you call those red lights? I don't know, highlights, low lights.
Oh yeah. Balayage.
There you go.
It's hard on both sides. People that are still a part of that church and have not, and are still fully enmeshed in it, like there's one girl some of them go way too far. Like I don't try to make everyone think like me.
Right.
A couple of them are way too far to the point I can't, it makes me sick every time they like post on Facebook or something. So I had to defriend them. This one girl, she's open about like Trump and like the January 6th thing. And it's all from a God. And I know it sounds fine because that's politics, but it's deeply rooted in church.
Yes.
Deeply. Like if you don't vote a certain way, you are not there's the term, you are not a real Christian.
Yes.
Because of whatever.
Yes. And that, I feel like that was a very like 2016 thing. I'd never quite seen that before. And maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but 2016 was really the year where I saw churches come out and openly be like, you do not belong here if you don't vote.
Yeah. Voting blocks. Yeah. So, but she's fully enmeshed in it, and I can't be friends with her and other people that just say things that are so far that like, I can't even have that conversation. They have all these damaging beliefs about people who aren't them. And I've had to let those relationships go because I don't respect them anymore. Like to me, for me to have an actual friendship with someone, we can be different, but like if they have different views about human rights, that's a fundamental thing for me. Yes. that I can't. And then on the other side, I grew up in such a weird, like it is, it's so weird. I grew up in, with 21 siblings in a fundamentalist religious environment. I was homeschooled until high school for the most part. It's really hard with people that grew up in normal lives. Like, there's a lot of, it makes you weird. It makes you weird when you don't live that life anymore. And if you've, incurred some trauma because of it, there's a long time I lied about being an only child. I did not bring up my upbringing. It's only recently that I really have to think about I'm dating now. And when I meet someone, I've had more than one be like, when it got to the point where I talked to them about the reality of how I grew up. And a few of them reacted in ways where I was like, I don't want to date this guy anymore. Like one guy found out about my family. He said, I'd be really uncomfortable around your family. I was like, this date is over.
Yeah.
And then,
well, I guess they're uncomfortable around you. So bye.
Yeah. So bye. And then other people I talk about it's a little overwhelming, more than once someone has said, I don't even know what to say. It's like, I know I'm weird, and then suddenly it's this weirdness, most people want a normal person. And I don't know, I still haven't figured it out. Cause I and my other siblings did this too. All of us lied, or a number of us did, about being only children. Cause we just don't want to get into it. Right. We just don't want to talk about it. It's a big thing.
Right.
And people think it's weird and then we're weird. And I don't know.
Yeah.
So I would say it's challenging in all ways on both sides.
Yeah. Has it impacted the way that you raise your own children?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in both good and bad ways. One, I'm definitely raising, they went to Catholic school for the first couple of years, which in Chicago, for the most part, you either go to Catholic school or you go to public school. And they went to Catholic school for a couple of years and we just moved them into CPS. And so they did get a lot of religious instruction when they were younger. They know.
Was your ex-husband Catholic?
Well, he grew up that way, but he's not practicing either.
I've noticed most people I know that grew up Catholic just aren't really Catholic anymore.
They're like, I'm Catholic. It's do you go to church? Nope. So I don't know. I didn't grow up Catholic, so I know nothing. I thought Catholicism was a dying religion when it's a dead church is what I was told.
I thought it died with King Henry VIII.
Yeah, but funnily, Catholicism is one of the most the biggest worldwide sects, which is hilarious that I had the totally wrong idea about that. But yeah, it's changed how I raise my kids. I try to be much more supportive of who they are, and what their heart is saying, what their instincts are saying. And if their instincts, something resonates with them about organized religion, great. But I don't want them to feel like they have to. What I think is destructive about the way I grew up, it was, here's the box, here's the rules, follow it, the end. And I just really don't think that's realistic. So I'm trying to come at it from the other side.
Yeah.
What does your heart say?
Did you have any weird feelings about sending them to a religious school? Did you have any concerns when you did it?
Yeah, because I was worried about how religion would affect the curriculum. But we're in Chicago, and this may be a Southern versus Northern thing there. And also Catholic's a little bit different. They taught real science. There were a lot of kids who were not Catholic in their school. So I felt but I was nervous about it. I was like, are you going to teach them the creation idea? What are they going to learn? I want them to learn real science, because the way I grew up, I was taught about the Big Bang and how it was definitely wrong. I was taught that evolution it was more like apologetics in terms of why evolution is wrong, why the Big Bang is wrong. And then you were taught very clearly the Bible's origin story, which is that God created the world in 7 days. And that was part of science class. There were a lot of things college is the first time I heard of Ida B. Wells. There were just entire big things missing from my education because it was Bible-based. It was Bible-based, and anywhere where the church disagreed with mainstream science, that was out. And so you learned why it was wrong. And then I got to college and I was like, oh, I was actually mad because I felt like there were big holes in my education that I had never learned about.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then you have people like you said, kind of your roommates where they're like, why do you think this? Have you ever thought of it this way? And you're just like, oh, I don't actually
broke.
No. Yeah. And then it took me doing my own research to find out that I'm actually a Democrat liberal. Didn't know that. And turns out I'm not. It took some shrooms to discover I'm not actually as religious as I thought I was.
Yeah,
but
that's for sure.
Yeah. But I think it's it's interesting to me to see these new kinds of religious people that are coming out of the woodwork. I think most of them are probably our generation or maybe the next generation under us, where they are religious and they do tout the teachings of the Bible, but they are also open to ideas and open to thought and open to discussion. And they vote for more liberal ideology than they would have in the past. And there are churches, pastored by gay men and lesbians and non-denominational churches who just, and I think that's very interesting. And I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. And I know there are a lot of people that hopefully they're listening to this. I like to pretend a lot of people are going to listen to this and think and get mad and start shit, that are going to say, no, the reason you like that so much is because it's sinful. Like it's sinful. And that's why it's alluring. It's sinful. And that's why it works so well for you, which I mean, is a good argument for anybody who's conservatively religious. But yeah, it's this interesting dilemma where you're like, I don't consider myself religious, but if there is a God, I hope he's not the one described in the Old Testament, because if he is, I'm screwed anyway. Like I was screwed the first day that I ever committed the first sin, which is when I was like 6 years old, but
very early on.
Yeah, very early on. Like I probably committed a sin in the womb, I'm sure. But then at the same time, you're like, I want people to have the freedom to believe whatever they want to believe, but I also don't want them to be brainwashed. It's like this, like I love my very deeply religious friends, but at the same time, I kind of want to have like a conversation with them. And because I remember how I felt about the people who kind of opened my eyes. And I would love to be that kind of person for somebody else who, even if they still were religious afterward, I just want to be that person who's like, why do you think that? Where does that come from? Where is the evidence to support that? Or at least admit you don't need evidence. Because I do have some people in my life who will just tell you, they'll just be like, I don't need evidence. I don't care to research it. I just want to think this. And you're like, at least you're honest, right? At least you're not pretending it's anything else. But
it's hard I've always had trouble with those conversations because I think a lot of, because that is how I think too, like, well, what's the deeper meaning here? What's the story? What's the research? What's the data? What's the actual truth of this? And the conversations I've had, and I don't know if it's a fundamentalist thing or church or Southern, because I really do believe people that are in religions, like maybe they're Baptist, which is less fundamentalist, that maybe they are better at having those, those conversations are different. Whereas fundamentalists, the answer really is, this is what God said, the end. This is what, and funnily, like sometimes, certain things, well, the Bible actually doesn't say that. It doesn't matter. It's just like this legalistic, this is what it is, the end. Yeah. And so what I have never been able to crack is how do you get people to be more receptive to new information and how to I know it's easier. Like if someone hands you a sheet with rules on it, it's so much easier to be like, well, these are the rules, the end. It's easy, right? You don't have to challenge anything. You don't have to grow. You don't have to learn. You don't have to say you're sorry.
Right. And when they teach you, when they literally teach you your whole life, anybody who asks you these questions are leading you to the devil, right? They're leading you away from Christ. So then you're 22, 23, you're with a bunch of your friends alone for the first time. Maybe you're in college, maybe you're in your first big city, and your friends are like, hey, why this? Like, why that? And you're torn between, oh my God, this is the moment they always told me where these horrible like devil worshipers were going to make me question my faith. But then you're like, also, that's a really good question. And now I'm wondering myself why I believe that. No, like, don't. No, that's what they want you to think. It's like this.
I'm being led astray. Like you really think that you're like, oh, I'm being led astray. Like, cause that inner conflict comes up because you're taught not to have, like, this is it. This is the answer. There should be no inner conflict. When really part of like a really vibrant, great life is learning, growing, being challenged, being uncomfortable. Yes. And you're taught if you have those feelings, that means you're being led astray. Like you're out of alignment with Jesus. And I don't know, like, I think that's the one thing that like, even though I'm not part of church anymore, but I think because of the impact it had on my life, if there was one thing that they would change, I really wish they would think about the messages they're sending to girls or people that don't fit into that box and the very real damage it's doing to people and consider like maybe you think they're breaking the rules, but actually, I'm sorry, I don't believe that. If I believed in God, I have a really hard time believing that an all-knowing, omnipotent being really wants these outcomes, of all these kids who are not straight, who commit suicide.
Right.
And girls growing up with these damaging ideas of themselves. I really just gut check. I don't think that such a being as a God would be into that unless he was a terrible person.
Right.
So
right. And that was kind of my argument too, is I used to say, they say he's omnipotent and they say he's omniscient. So he controls everything, but he also knows everything. And he made the rules that if you do these things, you burn in hell. But then he also already knows you're going to do all these things and go to hell, and he's not going to stop you. Is that somebody that you want to worship? Is that somebody that doesn't make any sense? Like, why would you?
Oh.
You got to pick one at least pretend like we don't have free will, or it was interesting to me that people believe that. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, if they know that I'm going to do all these things already, why then is the rule that that's the fast track to hell, as opposed to getting to learn from these? And you would just think that, like, if I created a human being, I think I would find so much more joy in seeing them learn and grow and change and, do wrong and learn from it and learn to do right and spread the teaching than love me or I'm throwing you in the
burning lake of fire. That's what hell is.
Yep. Yeah. And so I think that's why these discussions are so important. And I think also it's important to have them in a way that doesn't seem like an attack, because it's kind of like I mentioned earlier, people, when they feel very strongly about a religion or a faith and they don't really know why, they take everything as a personal attack. I think a lot of people will listen to this and think the whole thing is just a personal attack, when in reality, I think what that is them realizing they don't actually know why they believe certain things. And they do realize that a lot of their life has been controlled by other people. And they don't necessarily want to admit that, because nobody likes admitting they're not in control of themselves.
Right.
And so I think that's why I think these conversations should be had, because I think even if you learn from these conversations that you actually are that religious and you're even more religious, and in fact, you're going to go the Orthodox route, good for you. At least you had the conversation. Right.
Yeah. That you thought it through. Yeah. Like, I think, I read a quote the other day and I really wish I had it in front of me, because the way they said it was really impactful. It talked about what I would love to see is that in the future, living from a place of love, living your life from love, not from fear, because fear-based relationships aren't good for you. And I'm butchering the way they actually worded it, but that really hit me. And, both in life and then also thinking about religion. Like, if your relationship with Jesus is causing you to hurt people, hurt yourself, hurt your family, maybe something's wrong about it. Maybe it needs, and I don't mean, and again, I'm not bitter. I'm not against religion. I'm really not, but there are some very real, huge traumatic outcomes that come from being fundamentalist and being so legalistic about everything. And I think that matters. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had some bad impacts. A lot of my siblings have, the ones that were not straight, like as adults, they are actually traumatized by their experience in the church.
Yeah.
I was at a fundamentalist wedding for a family member, and I had forgotten what it was like. I had forgotten, and my siblings and I were the only one. We're all atheists now, or agnostic, other than maybe a couple. So we're all in the same boat. And I remember sitting with a couple of my siblings, and one was just like I was having a hard time because of all of the talk that I've forgotten about, and like the call and response, and they're like, yes, amen, absolutely. And then there was an altar call, and there was this whole thing about gender roles, about women submitting to their husbands. And I was just like, oh, I was having little panics on the inside with like a smile plastered on my face. I remember my siblings sitting next to me. I could hear them taking deep breaths. And like, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It's really traumatizing to certain people. And I don't know. I think it warrants taking a step back and being like, your relationship with Jesus is your own and is great. But if you're hurting people, maybe think about it. Just think about it.
If it's like keeping you up at night, maybe, and I think it's so interesting. I think churches have a responsibility. I think they have a responsibility to be held to a standard where they take care of their people. Now, a lot of churches, a lot of religions would argue, I am taking care of them by warning them about what's going to keep them from the pits of hell, right? So like, no matter what I say, there's going to be an argument on that side that's like, that's what we're doing. We're caring for our people. You're not caring for people by allowing them to, be gay or whatever.
Yeah.
But I definitely think churches have a responsibility to really understand, like you said, the potential damage that they're doing. I know a lot of people who went to churches, they swore up and down there was no damage whatsoever. Like they just had a wonderful time, like blah, 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 best memories of their life. Fantastic. Good for them. A lot of people, including myself, had a very VeggieTales religious upbringing. Right. But I also think they definitely need to take more responsibility in terms of how they're portraying women and how they're portraying men. And if they think they are completely right in that, I think they need to say it. They need to say it out loud. They need to be like, yeah, we don't like women here. Or like, yeah, we think women are submissive, instead of, no, like, that's not what we mean. That's just an interpretation. I mean, women should submit. Yeah, because the Bible says, but I think it's very much like the pro-life thing. If you are going to be of the belief that every single thing in the Bible is true, you need to admit that every single thing in the Bible is true. And if you're going to waver on any of it and claim that there's any kind of creative allowance there, then you need to admit that that same creative allowance could be applied to anything. And you can loosely change the rules to anything.
Right. And I even mean that in a positive way. Like that means like listening to your own heart and your own brain and your own experiences, going back to storytelling. That you're taking that into account, that people's stories matter, people's experiences matter. And it just doesn't work to be like, well, don't do that. Like, sorry, that's just not realistic.
Yeah. And have you ever had a moment since you left the church where you're like, I don't believe, I don't follow, I'm not in, but like, what if it is, what if it is real?
We are going to hell.
Yeah. Like, well, like what if it is? I have those moments all the time where I'm like, I don't believe that there was a boat that saved all the animals from the earth. Right. And I'm just saying, they tell you not to buy puppies from breeders because there's too much inbreeding going on and they're all fucked up. But we're supposed to believe that like all the animals came off the same boat and nobody got any kind of like, come on. But then when I like, say, for example, I get really high or something, I will think to myself, like, but what if it is real? Like, I'm screwed. Like, what if, like, am I too late to save? I don't know.
Well, two things. One, like now that we've lived through COVID, I am more amenable to the idea that there was a giant flood. I feel like that, look at what's happening now. I feel like maybe that did happen. I find that possible now. Yeah. But no, I think to me, like, who knows what happens after we die? I don't think anyone who says they know, whatever, that's not true. I think about what happens after you die. I don't know. And I'm open. There's the idea of like, yeah, maybe it's just all over. It's like, lights out, the end. That's possible. And it's also possible that maybe we become something else, who knows? Nobody knows. Maybe we go somewhere else. Maybe we live in the Matrix, and actually none of us are here. It's just one of those things that I don't think we're ever going to know. And I'm really okay. Like I have no qualms about that. I struggled with it for a long time because I felt like, oh yeah, I'm going to go to hell now. Like very literally. And I was almost willing to live my life in this way I didn't feel good about just so I didn't go to hell. But I don't worry about that anymore. I feel like at this point I'm living from my heart. I'm living from what I think, when you know better, you do better. So I'm doing the best with what I know. But I'm not willing to say that I have to follow a set of rules just to go to heaven and live my whole life in this way I don't feel good about. So I don't know. I think at this point, and maybe it's because I'm old now, kind of 43.
I still can't believe that.
I'm willing to, and also, something you don't learn in religion is I'm okay not knowing. I'm okay with like not knowing the answer to everything. There's not an answer to everything, and that's okay. And I've gotten real comfortable with that. What happens after I die?
I think that's the number one lesson I've learned as an adult, like outside of that direct, like close circle, is I love saying I don't know.
Yeah.
When I don't know something, I don't have to spin some HR answer. I don't have to produce a bunch of theories. If I don't know something, I find actual joy in being like, I have no idea. That's a great question. And I
Yeah.
think that's another thing that religion could use, is this idea that just because you're the pastor, just because you're the youth leader, you're allowed to say you don't know. And I think a lot of people would actually trust you and respect you a lot more when you're like, I don't know, but I'm going to look into that. That's a great question. You know?
I'm going to think about that. I love saying that. And there are some things that like something will happen and be like, I don't know how to take that. I don't know how to process that. And then like maybe later with more life experiences, you see it, and you are able to understand it a little bit better, which I think is awesome. I think it's a great part of life. But yeah, I don't worry about that anymore. I really don't. It used to be like very stressful. Like, oh no, my eternal salvation is in peril. But I just don't worry about that anymore.
Yeah.
Who knows? I guess we'll find out, or we won't, because we'll just be the lights out kind of dead where it's just over.
Right. Man, I really hope reincarnation is it. But at the same time, I don't know that I could do this shit over again, to be honest with you. Like
if it is, you don't know. You won't remember, like maybe you'll have those like dreams of like a past life, but
that's true. That's true. I hope I come back as like a worm though. In closing though, if you had a message, like say for example, somebody listening to this is right on the cusp. They're religious, but maybe they're not. They have questions, they have thoughts. What would you say to them? What would your message be for them?
I would say your feelings and thoughts are valid. It's, I think your first instinct is to push them down like, oh, I'm going off the path. I'm being led astray. Your feelings and your thoughts are valid. You're not broken. You're not wrong. You're not bad because you have thoughts and questions and you're wondering things and your heart is maybe saying something a little different from what your experience looks like. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the biggest thing I would say is you're not wrong. Your instincts aren't wrong. Your feelings aren't wrong. And there's nothing wrong with you. It's okay to question and think about things and figure out what works for you and what you feel good about. There is a path in life that you can feel good about. And being open to finding that for yourself, whatever it is. And maybe that's staying in church. Maybe it's a modified version of church. Maybe it's trying something else. It's your life and you can do that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree entirely. I would probably say, question everything all the time. Everything. Like question what your teachers are saying, question what your politicians are saying, question what your pastor is saying. Always question everything. Because that's the fastest you'll learn either why you do believe that thing or why you don't believe that thing. And I just think questioning everything just makes everybody more intelligent because people don't question enough. But yeah. Well, thank you so much, Heather. I really appreciate your time. This was a great discussion and an important discussion, I think. And I hope that you are able to kind of share your message with a lot of people throughout your life, because I think you would I don't think we would be surprised, but I think a lot of people would be surprised to find out how many people feel this way, how many people experience these things, how many people question the same things. And yeah, I hope you just keep fighting the good fight, leading the good word, living a good life, and congrats on your divorce.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. This is fun.
Yeah, no problem. It was great to see you.